Hi, my name is JRaby and I'm joining you today recorded from Florida. Hopefully there's a palm tree over my shoulder that gives you a little sense of what the weather looks like out here. I'm going to talk to you today about the Florida Technology Planning Framework that I did last year for the Florida Bar Foundation. The Florida Bar Foundation is the IOLTA funder in Florida and funds 30 some odd programs, legal aid programs in the state of Florida. So when we originally considered doing this, we wanted to create a statewide technology plan. It very quickly became clear that we didn't know enough about what was happening in Florida to be able to do that. So we decided to do an inventory so we could capture kind of a landscape, a snapshot of what was going on in terms of our technology. So I sent out a survey, got back a bunch of data, looked at that data and said, okay, what do we do with that? It's helpful to have an inventory. It's helpful to have kind of the picture of what's going on in terms of technology, but what does that mean for us and how do we provide some context for that information going forward in terms of decision making? So we looked at national benchmarks, and the two that I used were the Legal Services Corporation's baselines, hence the reason we're talking about it in this session, and the N10 National Technology Enterprise Network, a National Association of IT staff working in the nonprofit sector. They issue an annual staffing and investment report that talks about how nonprofits use technology in their programs. And so what I did was, and I'm going to show you a little picture here of what the document actually looks like. As you can see up here at the top, what I did was capture for each one of the areas, and I actually used the baseline components to drive the structure of the report. So this is the planning section, one of the early sections in the document. And here is a brief description of what the inventory told us, what we learned about, and kind of a summary of, so where are we in terms of technology planning in the state of Florida. Next section here is the national benchmarks, and you can see I used the LSC baselines as well as the N10 benchmarks. So each one of those sections then talks about, well, so we know where we are in terms of Florida. This is where LSC says we should be, and the baselines, and this is where N10's report says most nonprofits are. So it's kind of a way to do a comparison. And then lastly, you'll see here suggestions for the future. I did look at the Legal Services Corporation's Tech Summit report as well as their pro bono report and other documents just to get a sense of where do we think technology is going in the future and how we might want to position our programs to take advantage of that evolving ever-evolving landscape. So how did we want the framework to be used? Well, there were two basic users that we had in mind when we created the framework. One was obviously the Florida Bar Foundation, to look at it from a systemic perspective and get an idea of where the gaps were, where the strengths were, and how they might invest in technology from a statewide perspective and to work with their programs to improve overall. And the second group that we really wanted to target was the programs themselves. And part of the benefit the document was the benchmarks, because you could look at, so this is where we are in Florida, and then how do we sort of stack up against other legal aid programs around the country as well as other nonprofits. So it was just sort of a way to give people a sense of context around their own technology planning. I did do a survey afterwards, as a matter of fact, just within the last 6 weeks to follow up. It was issued about this time last year. To say, well, so did you use it? I did not get a lot of response, as sometimes happens with surveys, but the responses I got said that it was used primarily as kind of a validation for this is what we were already planning to do, or we had already identified our strengths and weaknesses, and this just proved to kind of confirm where we already thought we were. One of the feedbacks that I got in terms of things we could do better in the future would be to identify leaders in the state of Florida in terms of technology and then provide that information so that programs that perhaps saw that as a weakness or needed some assistance would be able to reach out for some help. So a last little chunk here in my section for this part is, if you'll notice up here, I have a little FJTC, that's the Florida Justice Technology Center. It's a little WordPress blog. You can follow along, which I hope you do, and see how we're doing in Florida. But if you go to the listening sessions page and scroll all the way to the bottom, all of the documents are there. There's an executive summary of the framework, as well as the entire framework document is available there free for download. Please use it. You're welcome to it. Any of the work that's in it, Massachusetts Legal Services is already saying they're going to use it as a, they'll do their own inventory, take out all the Florida specific stuff, and then plop their stuff in and have a fairly accurate sense of where Massachusetts fits into the larger benchmarks around the country. I would like a little credit, but take it, use it, and then give me some feedback about what you thought about it. I'm always interested in making improvements. So this is where we're going to pause, and I'll be back in a little bit to talk to you later in the program. Thank you.